the first one is true.
Live.
All right. Welcome to the Eyeballs Above Microphones podcast.
That's what we should rename it, because that's really what this has become. Like that guy off of the Tim the Toolman Taylor show.
Oh, the
What was his
neighbor.
name? The neighbor.
Yes.
What was the neighbor's name? Do
Oh,
you know?
I don't remember. Yeah. A little
But
before
that
my
guy.
time. No, this is not the Eyeballs Above Microphones podcast. This is the Dynamic Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Robinson. I'm chasing logic everywhere on the internet.
And I'm his loyal friend Stuart Gardner, and I am some variation of Stuart Gardner all over the internet as well.
And this week, we're going to review John Wick Chapter 3.
Woo!
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But before we go on that blood-fueled? I mean, everything's technically blood-fueled.
Technically.
Blood-filled action-adventure review. Stuart, I think you wanted to talk about a different blood-filled action-adventure movie trailer.
I did. I was looking through trailers to discuss this week, and I came across Rambo. Did you see that trailer?
Yeah, I did.
Oh no, no! I can already tell. Tell me how you felt about it before I go in.
So, Rambo and I have a complicated history. It was one of those movies that like I watched when I was a kid, and I had absolutely no idea what was going on except this dude was killing the shit out of people. Um, because
Yeah, he does that very well.
right, but when you're like 9 years old, like the Vietnam War is not a thing you know about or understand or appreciate.
Right. That first movie came out in the 70s, so yeah, it was fresh for them.
Yeah. And so I not recently, but like I ended up rewatching those when I was a little older. And the thing I liked about the Rambos, with the exception of I think Rambo 3, one of them was very bad. It was the one where they go to the Middle East.
Yeah.
But the thing that I liked about the Rambos is that despite being a like stupid over the top action movie, they actually like made political statements and like it was they were action movies that had like meaning. And this does not look like that. This looks really bad.
This looks like everything that Rambo is minus the political undertones.
Yeah, well, right. Like it's yet another action movie, and we'll get into this a little bit later too. But it looks like a bland yet another action movie.
See, if you want me to be honest with you, I only saw the first Rambo once, and I was a kid. The only Rambo I remember seeing is the 2008 Rambo movie. So that was the most recent one before he decided to do this. And here's the thing: if you want me to be completely honest with you, when I'm watching Rocky, or not Rocky, his name isn't Rocky, Sylvester.
Oh.
When I'm watching when I'm watching Sylvester Stallone replay a lot of his iconic roles, I love what he's done with the Rocky franchise, right? I love the role he's taken. Now, obviously in this Rambo movie, he's taking more of a prominent role, but I really, really am excited to see where this revenge, like he is death type storyline is going to go. It could be, obviously, I don't feel like there's going to be any political undertones, but like it could be a very good action adventure flick that you gotta just sit down, turn your brain off a little bit, and just shove popcorn in your face.
Okay, so all right. But that's the thing, is you really got to turn your brain off on this one, because and it's like the same thing for like that new Terminator movie they're doing, right?
Like,
Despite the like So the Terminator movie upsets me more. So like, let's not get into that. Like, I'm really upset about it. But the thing you got to really do is really turn your brain off, is because not only is he going to like kill the shit out of some people in a way that like
so gruesome.
He's not even really done before. Like they literally show
Right.
him like in the trailer where he's like surrounded by like 20 dudes, and like it is
Somehow
it
he
is
gets it out of
sort of shown that he like melee weapons his fucking way out of those 20 dudes.
I love it.
And so like that's already like, you're already like fucking pushing the boundary. But then then beyond that, dude's like 60 or 70 at this point.
Easily 70.
And he's starting to look it. Like you know, he's pulling off the whole distinguished thing. I mean, it's Sylvester Stallone, right? Like, dude's still hot.
Like,
dude is
yes,
still hot. But
still get. But like, here's the thing. Like, nobody who's that actor? I can't think of his name right now. But he's like been old and grizzled. But he's been in all these action movies for a long time. And like, it's that old man coming back to get you thing. It's like Jackie Chan in that recent movie he did, The Foreigner. Did you ever see that?
no, I didn't see that.
Oh my goodness. Jackie Chan looks old in that movie, but he still looks like he's getting it and kicking ass. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, but like at a certain point, like I have to go. Like I can't believe that like a super trained, like in his prime 20s, trained since childhood super Spartan man could fight, like it could do this shit or survive that many wounds or keep walking after losing that much blood. But a 70-year-old dude, I don't care how good a shape you're in, like shit just stops working at that point. You know what I mean? Like.
Oh my gosh, in the trailer, doesn't it look like he's walking with that knife and he has like 3 bullet wounds in his back?
Oh yeah, like he's like covered in his
Like,
own blood in the trailer.
How is he not? I understand where that's coming from. I completely. You gotta dive into the world of Rambo. He's more than just a man. He's a superhero.
Yeah, okay. Like, it looks like an action movie that like requires a ridiculous amount of belief suspense and also has like no plot whatsoever, really, in a bad way. Action movies for me have really got to like. I've just seen so many of them. My dad's a huge action movie guy, so I've just seen a ton of them. So they really have to like pull me in with some kind of like political intrigue or like secret society stuff,
right?
Or they've got to like grab those heartstrings and yank hard, right? Like and all the best action movies in the last few years have like done like Casino Royale, right? I mean, it's a James Bond movie, so fucking
James Bond is James Bond,
but
right?
the one that always comes to mind is the I don't know who you are, but I have a very particular set of skills. What's the Taken. That's
I was just about to say that. I was just about to say, his name isn't Bryan Cranston. It's
Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson. Thank you.
Yeah.
Liam Neeson in Taken is, but the law of diminishing returns with those movies. Oh my gosh!
Yeah. Let's not talk about the other Taken, but like
Goodness.
Taken 1 is like is like, you know what I mean? Like, dude's a superhero. Yeah. Like he like kicks. And he's a little bit aging in that movie as well, right? But like he straight up beats up like 5 dudes at one time by himself.
Yes,
you know. But also like it's much easier for me to suspend my disbelief because like I'm emotionally invested. I'm like, oh like
they got his daughter.
Oh man, yeah, like you know what I mean? Like you viscerally feel that with him in the same way that like John Wick Chapter 1, like. You know, spoiler alert, I guess. Like, if you're here and you haven't seen John Wick 1, stop now. Like, you shouldn't see John Wick.
If you haven't seen the first 2
you've
John Wick,
you
need to turn back and come back on another time.
Yeah, because like we're talking about a movie where they reference the first one, and but like anyway, so like in the first one when the puppy dies, like every time he kills somebody, I just see that little puppy's eyes in my head, and I'm just like, you murdering little shitbag. Like I love it.
You deserve that one.
Like,
you deserve that one.
Like somehow, like for me, it's like John Wick's totally justified because they killed this one puppy. But like you know that kind of stuff, and they ink on the heartstrings. This Rambo, trailer makes it look exactly like they're going to do some kind of like referential thing where he's like getting revenge on the U.S. government and stuff. And that was the other thing that like I liked about the Rambo movies is that like, yes, it's a military themed action movie. Yes, it makes political statements, but it doesn't make like the U.S. like government as like the raw good guys. Like they really was like actually a hard criticism of us, and I really liked that about them. And this doesn't look like this. This looks like he's cleaning that shit up, right? Like he's just gonna go and get all that revenge that he said he was gonna get in all the other movies. And it's like, yeah, that's fine, but like honestly, I felt like all the other movies resolved that stuff very well, and so
yeah.
And not that I'm some Rambo super fan. Maybe some some people who are like really into Rambo,
like diehard Rambo
are gonna
fans,
be really
are like
excited about this and like have that same kind of like visceral hatred of the like main, I don't even remember the characters' names, the CIA guys or whatever that like kept betraying Rambo and stuff, and like maybe they're gonna finally get their conclusion that they wanted. I don't know, but I don't know. It just looks bad. It just looks really generic. It's not that it looks bad. It just looks very generic, and for me,
I'll give you it looks generic, but I'm telling you, I'm telling you, I'm gonna go into that movie. I'm gonna get a big box of popcorn, big thing of popcorn, and I'm just gonna shove popcorn in my face. I'm gonna just watch him watch this old man do these impossible things, you know?
Okay. I mean, I'm really excited for you. I'm really excited for
Thanks.
you. But yeah, so here, okay, I have one more complaint about this trailer that is not actually specifically about this trailer. It is about a trend in trailers I have seen up to this point, and after I get off my soapbox for this, we can start our movie review. But I am really sick already of this like shit that trailers are doing where like at the beginning they're like psh, 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 big scene, and then they're like psh, this movie trailer starts now. Like I don't need a pre-trailer. I don't need you to tell me the trailer starts now. Like I fucking like there's only two places people are watching trailers, right? It's like on YouTube, which means I clicked on some shit that said movie blah 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 trailer, or I'm at the movie theater and like I'm at the movie. Like you play the trailers before the movie. Like I'm not stupid. Like I've been here before.
Yeah. I feel like they don't cut out. They need to do better about like just cutting that part out, especially when you're clicking on the trailer itself. Man, that stuff kills me.
Oh yeah,
and it's bad about it, and it's a trend. You're right. It is a trend.
I mean, the Sonic trailer did it as bad as that was. That made it even worse. I think the Aladdin trailer does it too. Now that I'm remembering back a little bit here, but
yeah,
like I think it has something to do with like, oh, in the digital age, the millennials have no attention span, and so we must like throw stuff at them to try and
grab them.
Like, hey, like. You look at this shit. You like this shit? All right, stick around because we're gonna give you more of that. The trailer starts now. Like
you like this? You like this? We're gonna give you a lot of this. Okay. Now hold on.
But hang on. There's a build up coming.
We're going to show you the build up to that cool scene.
Put the phone down. Okay. Yeah. It's that is driving me bonkers. So I don't know what else to say.
You're not wrong, and I can't disagree with that, man. It's obnoxious to say the least.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, you ready to review some John Wick?
I am. I'm excited to review some John Wick.
I mean, reveal the review.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay. So. For anyone new here, this is the way our reviews work. We're going to give a very short summary of our review up front here, and then we're going to give you a rating, and our rating is a 4-tier system, so it's never watch this movie, catch it if it's on, watch it on a streaming service, or like a must-see, you have to go see this in the theaters, top-tier movie. So, Stuart, why don't you start us off with your review?
So, John Wick, Chapter 3. I thoroughly enjoyed John Wick Chapter 1 and John Wick Chapter 2. I am a huge action fan, if you can't tell by my statements about the Rambo trailer. And I really like Keanu Reeves. Even though he's a kind of like a two-note actor, he does the same things. But he does John Wick very, very well. And not to get into too much of the story, but this picks up right after the second John Wick movie. So you're watching. If you were to watch these movies in order, you'd watch the first movie, which picks up right after you'd watch the second movie, which picks up right after the first movie, and so forth and so on. And they even say so in the movie. This whole series, this whole franchise takes place over the course of a week or so. So I really like what they did with building the world, making the world bigger. I'm very big into world building. They made the world a lot bigger. They did a very good job of developing John Wick in a way I didn't think that they would be able to. And I think they did an excellent job with the new cast members that they added and the way that it ended. I enjoyed the way that it ended and how it took the turns that it took. If I were to give this a rating, I would say this is a must-see in theaters. I think this is a must-see movie in theaters. Now, mind you, I own John Wick 1 and John Wick 2 on Blu-ray. So I would definitely suggest that someone that has been following this franchise, if you're just jumping in, obviously it's not one of those, but this is a must-see in theaters movie for me.
Okay, so, as you can tell from my review of the Rambo trailer, I do like action movies, but they've got to have more than just like blood-filled action scenes. So when this was getting ready to come out, you actually told me how much you liked John Wick.
Yes.
And I just decided that I was going to go watch it, and I rented it on Amazon. I streamed it. I thought it was a really good action movie, and I honestly waffled really hard on whether I even wanted to see the second one because especially,
I remember that.
Yeah, and I even texted you. It was like, is this worth seeing? Because the thing I liked about the first one is that like I felt emotionally invested in the story. But the action, it's really good. It's really solid action. But here's the thing I will say. If you are interested or are a fan of action movies, the John Wick series is very much worth watching all the way through. And if you've seen the first two and you liked them, even if you just kind of liked them, this is a must see in theaters. Like this for me is the highest tier. And like since I liked the first two, I would absolutely put this at the highest tier. If you thought the first two John Wicks or even just the second John Wick was okay or like maybe a little bit bad, then I would say that this is still worth watching, but I would definitely catch this on a streaming service. So I'm kind of like, I'm being a little coy here and kind of trying to give 2 ratings.
Right, you're trying to give that 3.5 range there.
Trying to give that like halfway thing. But honestly, like if you have clicked on this or are watching this, it's because you at least are interested in John Wick Chapter 3. And if you're interested enough to watch something like this, it's a must see in theaters. Like the theater experience alone is worth it. The thing about the John Wick movies that are so good is that they are so focused on all the little details, all the way from like the like cinematography to like the acting. It's like the small stuff that makes they get everything right. And so I think that's what makes it clear. So, but having said all of that, this now is the point in the podcast where we cut to the spoiler section. So we're going to do a more long form review discussion about the movie, about the plot points and criticisms. And boy, I do have some criticisms about this one. So this is going to be real fun, Stuart.
And I love this movie, so.
Yeah. And so I've already heard one thing we disagree on, which is great. But yes, so the rest of this is going to be totally spoilery. So if you have like seen the movie and want to hear people discuss the movie and the plot, this is a great thing for you. Otherwise,
and if you haven't seen the movie, please come back after you watch the movie and let us know if you agree with our opinions or who has a better argument to their side of this movie.
Or if you're about to leave right now, just comment that Matt was right and move on and never come back. We're okay with that too. Perfect. Okay, so spoiler warning go away if you don't want spoilers. Stuart, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll start. Listen, I really enjoyed this movie, and the reason I really enjoyed this movie is after I rewatched the second one before I went to go see the third one, in theaters. And what I was doing was I didn't get a chance to watch the first one again, but I really enjoyed the fact that it was so seamless. And one of my favorite scenes, honestly, is when he's with the doctor. That's right at the beginning of the movie. You know, he's trying to get through, and these people are like, they're counting down, and you're passing all these assassins in New York City, and you're just like, man, this assassin network is huge. It's just huge, and everybody's like communicating with each other. Last scene and wherever he was, and last scene in Chinatown or whatever. So I really love the scope that this movie takes. Just putting that out there, the scope this movie takes on the Assassin's world and the world building that they've started with the Continental and everything from there forward, it has just been amazing. They've done a phenomenal job. I love the beginning scene, like I was saying with the doctor, when the doctor's like, "Man, I stopped," and he's like, "I can't help you anymore," and he was like, "Oh, they'll never believe you," and he's like, "Yeah, but you know." It's just part of it. So then John Wick, he's like, "Will you just get me? There's a gun in the thing. Will you just get me right here?" And he's like, "Be sure not to bang." He just shoots him right there. I was like, "Oh man, no mercy. We're starting off hot." I loved the first, especially that first few. I love action, and the first hour of action is just amazing. Before he gets out of the country, is just awesome. I just love everything about how he had to go to that library, and he dropped the dog off, his new dog, that he got in the second movie, or the end of the first movie, really, right?
Yeah, it's the end of the first movie.
And he drops the dog off with the guy at the Continental, and he goes and gets the book, and he goes to fight that guy, and he's like, "Who's ever gonna know?" He's like, "I still have time." And he's like, "Nobody will know." And the way he breaks that dude's neck, man.
Oh yeah.
Come on. So like I loved all of that.
So, okay. So the thing that makes this movie good, in my opinion, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, is that they really, really, really focus hard on little details. Things like on the cinematography side, they crank the saturation up to make everything feel more intense. They keep the aperture on the camera wide open, so all the lights have this starburst effect, and like everything that except like the immediate thing in the thing is out of focus a little bit. It's like very subtle. You know, they do a lot of stuff like that. Like, you know, the action's really good. Whatever. Like the scenes are super choreographed. They're super well done.
Super well done. Here's the thing.
Fairly believable.
Yeah, well, that was what I was just about to say. Like these scenes are more believable than I've seen a lot of action movies do. You know what I mean? I'm not the guy that's like, "Oh, well, they should have ran out of bullets," but I am that guy.
Well, but that's one of the things they do really well, though, right? Is that like, they really count the bullets. Like if you sit there and count bullets, like John Wick runs out of bullets when he should run out of bullets. And they integrate that into the fight scenes in really interesting ways. Like one of the ones that like really stuck out in my mind of that was specifically like when they're like, he like comes back and he's like, "Oh, they got armor upgrades," and they're like, "We need a bigger gun," so they get the shotguns.
Yeah.
And then like shortly after that, like John Wick comes into a corridor and like blasts 6 shots out of the shotgun, and then like starts reloading. And after he reloads the first shell, some dude comes running around the corner, and he has to like pop that dude and then go back to reloading.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Like they really make a point of like, you know, counting bullets. They make a point of these things, and they make them a focal point of a scene generally.
And that's what I love about the John Wick series as a whole. They take those things that most action movies take for granted, like the bullet count, like the range on a weapon, or things like that. Like they take those things into account, and especially like when he's firing or whatever he does, it all seems properly done, and those little details matter and make a big difference.
So the other thing that I will say, all right, first off, my little tangent, the thing, and I think I complained to you about this over text for the first two as well, is that like they completely ignore the logistics of New York City. Like, I can't remember if it's the first or the second one. So like I live here, right? Like I have to commute on
Right.
this every day, right? But like I think it's the first or the second one, but there's like a fight scene where they're in the Oculus down by the World Trade Center and they get on the
Yeah.
PATH train at the World Trade Center. That only goes to New Jersey. But the whole time they're fighting on the PATH train, it's playing the audio for the Uptown like C train, and it's going to all these places the Uptown C train goes, and then they get off like in like Midtown Manhattan, and I'm like, that path does not go there. And this movie suffers from that a little bit. Like there's like the horse fight scene, and like when he runs out of the
Yeah.
he like turns the corner from the stable. He's like down in Chinatown. He like turns the corner from the stable, and all of a sudden he's in Queens. I'm like, that's not how New York City works, buddy. Like I don't care what kind of horse you got. So you know that stuff bothered me a little bit. He kept jumping up and down the city all over.
So the details that they take in fighting and with guns, they completely throw out the window for New York City.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like they just throw all logic out the window when it comes to like getting him to places they want him to be, which I don't know why. Like they could do a lot with like that, but you know, whatever. I definitely have like some problems with some of the scenes, but like one of the reasons I think this is like a huge thing you have to see in theaters is because I think the sound design is so good. Like
Yeah.
you like when you have the theater experience, like you feel every hit, you feel every like stab and punch and whatever. And like
Every
one of
shot,
the things that they
everything.
do that's very subtle but very good is like the vast majority of the movie up until until the big fight scene after he meets Halle Berry's character, which we'll talk about
Right.
later. Which is like towards the end, like it's the third act. The first
Yeah.
two acts, there's like very few gunshots.
Yeah.
And like every gunshot is like startling. Like it's like
Yeah, and it's crazy because I appreciated that because when they were in that, when he was deconstructing all those guns to make the one gun that he can take that one shot with.
Yeah.
Like, did he ever take another shot with that gun?
No, because he couldn't get it loaded. Right?
Yeah.
Like they really prevent him from having a gun the entire time and like
Yes.
really focus on creative fight scenes, I think.
Yes, and I really enjoyed that whole knife scene and everything. I wanted to point something out, and I don't know if anybody else noticed this. There was a lot of nut shots in this movie.
Yeah.
A lot. Like it was kind of startling because like I said, I rewatched the second one, and I don't remember the first one as having that many nut shots. The second one had a couple, but like not as many as like I felt like every time he fought somebody, he was hitting them in the nuts. I get it. It's a good hit, but like my gosh,
I didn't pick up on that. Like it didn't stand out to me. But
for some reason it did
yeah.
to me. Every time they got hit in the junk, dude, I was like, oh gosh, oh man, oh, like when he went through like 4 dudes and he hit every last one of them in the nuts at least twice.
But that is one of the things that like I also think is great about this theater experience. Like since everything is so visceral the whole movie,
Yeah.
like that like collective like ooh oh you know like
Yeah.
and
It's
like
fun.
and it's a very like tense and like everyone being tense adds to it. Like I noticed like halfway through the movie that I'd been like chewing on my hand the whole time like this like just like waiting for the next like thing to happen. It's very very intense.
I was sitting next to speaking of the intensity of it all, I was sitting next to this gentleman, and he was with his girlfriend, and they kept jumping through the movie like I was, but like when we were walking out of the movie, he was like, man, the movie was so intense. Like by the end of it, it was kind of numbing, like how like all the intensity just ramps up. Did you feel that? Because I didn't feel that. Like I feel like I was with it the whole way through.
I definitely felt with it the whole way. Like I think that it doesn't like they even like they one of the things that I didn't like about it is actually the desert scene, and I felt like that was intentionally put in there to give you a chance to recover
Breathe.
because
Yes.
because it's right after one of the most intense scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
I thought it honestly it went on a little too like by the time that came around, I was actually like kind of a junkie. I was like, yeah, fuck this, like whatever, man. He's wandering the desert. Like, get us back. I want to see him kill some people. Like, but
Just past that point. Yeah.
yeah. So, but no, actually, you know what's funny is that you mentioned that sitting next to me was a boyfriend and girlfriend duo through the whole movie, and the girlfriend was killing me. Like it was really hard not to crack up at her because like every time she was like, "Oh damn!" Like she was just losing it every time something happened, and then there's like this scene where he like walks into Halle Berry or whatever, and he's like looking all haggard and stuff because he's just been like fighting like crazy to get there. And like I hear her go like, "You don't think he's hot?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, because I can't hear the boyfriend. He's like, "Oh,
right."
sorry. And she's like, "Oh, I kind of like his nasty ass hair. It's hot." And I'm like, like Jesus Christ. So, but
I had, oh goodness, I wrote their names down. Agnes and Robert in my theater. Ask me why I know their names. And again, this is less about the movie, more about the theater going experience with like certain people. I knew they sat 2 rows ahead of me, and I knew their names because Agnes kept being like, Robert, blah 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 blah. Who is he, or who is this person? Like they never saw the first 2 movies and just decided to catch John Wick Chapter 3, and he kept leaning over and be like, I don't know, Agnes, I don't know. Like it was almost cartoonish how bad these 2 people were in the theater with me, but like I still was in the movie. But every once in a while she'd like say something and it'd bring me out. I'm like, who are you guys? Like she had kicked her shoes off. I was in one of those nice theaters that have the reclining chairs. She had kicked her shoes off. It was like, this isn't your living room, people.
Yeah. So
but
okay,
back on topic.
Okay, so here's what I want to do next because I think it's kind of important. I kind of want to go like plot point by plot point and like kind of talk a little bit about the action scenes because this is the plot and stuff is where my criticisms of this movie really come in.
Right.
So just a refresher, John Wick Chapter 1, some like douchey Russians that he like helped set up as a crime family steal his car and kill his puppy. And,
right.
And so then he kills all of them.
All of them. That is not an exaggeration.
and then everyone's like the whole kind of recurring theme of that movie is like, oh, you're back. Oh, you're back. You're back. And he's like, oh, I don't know.
Baba Yaga, he's back. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in Chapter 2, the dude who helped him get out in the first place is like, hey, you're back. I'm calling in this thing you owe me. You can't.
The blood oath.
Yeah.
Yeah, the marker. Yes.
And I'm calling in the marker. You have to go kill this person for me. And the person ends up being the super important person in the lore of John Wick that doesn't really matter. And
it does. Well, here's the thing, right? If it doesn't really matter then, it doesn't matter now. But it does matter then, and it does matter now. And the reason I know it's just a recap, but like she was a member of the High Table, and he wanted her spot on the High Table. So to get that, she had to die. And so he called in his marker so that John Wick would go kill her. And he has to do it by honor bound. Otherwise, without rules, they're nothing but animals, like Winston always says. So he goes and he does that. And then after he fulfills his marker, he goes to go kill the guy that's now a member of the High Table by blood right. You know what I mean? And he does it in the Continental, which is the issue.
So, yes. And also, the lore of John Wick doesn't matter still. And so John Wick Chapter 3 is the culmination of this. As Stuart said, he kills the guy in the Continental, and that is like what you get like excommunicated. And actually, in the first one, they show you this because the one woman tries to kill John Wick in the Continental, and she ends up getting killed for it at the end of the first movie. And Winston, being John's friend or whatever, instead of outright killing him, he like
Gives him
basically,
an hour.
yeah, it gives him an hour head start, and then like cuts him off from all of their resources, cuts him off from
Right.
all their stuff, and then sets like the entirety of the assassin world to kill him. Um,
And I love in the beginning of the movie when he's like, "Yeah, about 50% of all the assassins in the world will be interested in this contract." I'd say it's an even fight. I was like, "Oh,
yeah, yeah.
oh, that
Okay,
was a hype moment."
okay. So, um, so
So we start off.
you kind of got at my first criticism is that like apparently everyone in the Assassin's Guild is like a John Wick wannabe. Like no one, like he just fucking slaughters these people who are supposed to be like the same as him, and just he slaughters them in droves throughout this movie, which
This is
I
the
found
thing.
kind of a bummer because I was actually hoping that it would be more like character-y driven, like kind of 1v1, maybe 1v like a couple fights, kind of
Right.
like the first fight
Like the
scene
common.
the first fight scene in the library.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Like that was great, right? Because like they obviously knew each other. There was a little bit of a repertoire there.
Yeah.
And that fight scene was very personal. It was very well choreographed and it was very interesting and it was not a bloodbath. Right? It
Right.
was like it was someone like John Wick was fighting someone who was also a badass assassin in the same way that
Right.
he is. And that was great. And then from there, I think is when he goes down to Chinatown because he gets injured in that fight. The dude
Yes.
like stabs him, and so he has to go get sewn up. And so then he goes down to Chinatown, and the doctor patches him up, right?
Right.
And that's when he like gets the pain meds. He shoots the doctor to like make it look like he stole the shit,
Mm-hmm.
and then he leaves. And then from there is the fight scene in the stable. What did you think of that?
I like the fight scene in the stable. I mean, it was a lot of like goons. It was less of a. I thought that it was like a dedicated group of guys that had been kind of following him from the beginning of the movie. So you see him walking down the street, and they're in the car watching him, and then they kind of catch up to him in the stable. And in the stable, it's kind of like a. I thought it was going to be more intense, but it ended up being kind of like, oh, these are just the goons, and he's kind of like cutting through them. Because they're trying to make a name for themselves as opposed to them being ready to fight John Wick. You know what I mean?
Okay,
So
I mean, I'll give you that one. I thought
I
that
mean,
fight scene was really good. The thing I didn't like about that fight scene was I felt like the first time he used the horse to kick someone in the head was really brutal and
epic.
great, and
Yeah.
it was like, oh shit, like like it like jumps out and gets you, and it has this great shock value. And then he like basically did the same thing like 2 or 3 more times, and I was just like, oh yeah. Actually, you had this great thing and now you've ruined it. Kind of like a dad
Oh,
joke
no.
or whatever. Like,
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I understand that mentality, but like me watching him do it the first time, I was like, oh, that's a way to do it. And then he did it a second time, and I was like, oh, yeah, why not keep doing that? You know what I mean? That's where my mind went.
so I guess, so I've been around horses in real life, so there was some of that. There was also like, for what it was worth, as soon as they went into that stable thing, I was like, oh, he's gonna get one of those horses to kick someone in the head. Like that's gonna be a way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That hadn't crossed my mind.
I pegged it immediately, but then the first one when it happens still got me. Like still like, pow, like I was not ready for it. It was great. It was epic. Even like that was the thing that I loved about it so much, was that like I saw it coming and it still got me. And then when he kept doing it, it was just like, okay, like the gimmick is over. Not that it like ruins the fight scene. The fight scene's still fine. Like I like when he like runs out like dragging the dude kind of like a cowboy.
Right. Yeah.
So that was
I like
cool.
that. I'll tell you where my first issue in the movie comes, and it's the next scene with him on a horse and guys on motorcycles with guns. You know, like he's
yeah, okay. I don't remember this scene offhand. I remember him riding the horse into Queens.
yeah. Well, they were on that bridge, and
Yeah.
he's riding down the bridge that's been closed, so the guys on the motorcycles follow behind him, and they get up right next to him, and instead of like hanging back and shooting him, You know what I mean? Or at least shooting his horse or shooting at him.
Yeah.
You did. I don't remember um exactly what was going on because, like I said, I remember that scene and thinking like, oh, why didn't they just like, if anything, they should have shot the horse, but they get up real close enough for him to make his close quarters combat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can definitely see that. I also think that like shooting the horse is probably not quite as realistic as you think. Though I guess like you can pump enough bullets in it, it'll go down. But like,
Right.
um, but yeah, for sure.
That was probably the only one of the only fight scenes that I was in that I was watching while I was watching it. I was like, well, why didn't they just do this? You know what I mean? As opposed to what happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so,
I think the knife fight scene is one of, if not the best fight scene in the movie,
oh, for sure.
where they're like breaking the glass and throwing knives at each other. Like when he chucks the
I
glass at somebody and kills them, that was pretty
Yeah,
good.
I love that scene. That's a really strong. I really like that action scene, and it's right after that gun scene I was talking about where he could only fire the one bullet, and it's really interesting how they build that tension of him like, oh, I'm gonna get this gun, and then once I have this gun, I'm gonna wreck shop, and it's not exactly how that plays out.
Yeah, I think that's legit. I do think that like him constructing the gun last minute. Well, one like him like mixing the gun parts was not was another one of those like little details they got wrong. I think that's part of the
Right,
problem is that like they get so many of the little details right that like then the other little stuff that they get wrong bothers you so
right.
much. There's that, but I did think it was good. Um, I thought it was cool. Uh, I don't know. I don't have much to say. Like the action scenes in this are just absurdly well choreographed, absurdly well done. I think actually now that I've thought about it, my favorite action scene is actually what I want to talk about next is Halle Berry's character. So
Right. I'm sorry, but real fast, what they did right after that, those action scenes, he goes to the and this is part of that world building I love.
yeah.
He goes to the theater and he's like, I have my key, get me out. And she's
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah,
oh, you did the high table wrong, you can't. And you realize like that giant cross on his back is like a thing that everybody in this group has. You see the wrestlers, they all have it. You see all the dancers, they all have it. You know
yeah.
what I mean? They all have that cross. So like they all put in the work to earn that key. And you see how that world expands there.
Oh
And
yeah.
you also get the little thing that like um I forget the actress's name, but she was not a member of this assassins. She's like this own organization.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're not like a part of the whole guild and everything. So it really builds this mythos there about like, oh, John Wick was a part of this group, and then he uses them to get out to Halle Berry, where we see Halle Berry for the first time, and you're like, oh, he has her marker. That because I was trying to figure out when he pulled the marker out of the book. I was like, whose
Yeah.
marker is that? He has somebody's marker.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And you are right that is like the first moment where we like actually start to understand and know John Wick the character a little bit. So that was good.
Right.
That was good. I do like the little line like it's another one of those small things where they like they don't give you a ton about the world, but like when they do a thing that's world related, it is so like kind of like seeped in mystery and ritual in a way that like
Yes.
definitely makes you feel like there's a lot more there than there probably is. Like the thing where he says that like I'm an orphan of Belarus or something of like orphan
Yeah.
of your tribe or something like that. I am owed. Like that line is like just so like it
There's
has a
so
lot
much
of
behind
meaning in
that.
there.
That
Yeah.
yeah.
So that is really good. So
And
okay,
maybe
oh, go ahead.
yes. Go ahead.
No, do your
I was
thing.
just gonna say maybe one of my things is like one of the things I love about this series is the world building, and it reminds me of when I watched Not to go on a tangent, but when I watched Star Wars for the first time, and Obi-Wan Kenobi mentions the Clone Wars, and I'm like, what are these Clone Wars? This is obviously well before the prequels, or not well before the prequels, but before the prequels, and I'm watching Obi-Wan talk about the Clone Wars, and that's a time, that's a history that I don't know personally, and it makes me more invested in the world. It makes the world feel more real, more lived in when you do things like what John Wick is doing here, or the Obi-Wan Kenobi's thing, because you're like, hey, there are stories that we don't know. There are things and questions that we don't have the answers to, and we probably may never get the answers to that, but it makes the world feel real. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally know what you mean. I think some of it's maybe a little too over the top, which sounds ridiculous now that I say it out loud. But pardon me. But let's move on. I don't have much else
Right.
to say. I think the world is fine. I think it's interesting enough, and so I do think they do a good job of the world building insofar as
Yeah.
that they do it. So he goes in, he meets Halle Berry's character. Halle Berry, dope actress. Like, I don't know,
Amazing.
anything, like she kills it in this role. Actually, like she does a great job. She
I'm a huge Halle Berry fan, and watching her in this role compared to her last 5 roles that I saw her do, back to form, back to the Halle Berry that is like always killing it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And they set her up really well. I love her dogs. I think that's a cool and interesting twist.
It's awesome.
And I like the like they give you the backstory on her. Like they explain the marker and all this stuff, and like again give you yet another side of John Wick. They give you
Yes.
yet another side of these characters, and they just like give you just enough.
Just enough story to be like, so she doesn't know where her daughter is, but John Wick does, and she doesn't want to know because she doesn't want her gone after. It's a whole thing that they could build a whole nother world off that alone, and I love it.
Yeah, but it's also very human in a way.
Yes.
So, but here's the thing. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
So here's the thing. So they go from there, and they go to the dude who makes the gold coins that all of the assassins use as their currency.
Yeah.
And he's like, where is the guy who sits above the high table? And he's like, that's who I want to meet and stuff. And then they like kind of have a disagreement. I don't really remember why they have a disagreement, but then he's like, oh, well, now I've given you something. I want something. And he's like, I want the dog. And she's like,
Yeah.
you can't have my dog. And he's like, okay, fine, if I can't have the dog. And then he shoots the dog. Just
Yeah, he's like, if I can't have the dog, nobody-
if I can blast the dog. And the dog
Right.
has a bulletproof vest on, so it ends up surviving, and then Halle Berry loses her cool. And again, this is one of those things that makes this action scene great, is like, beyond it being super well choreographed, is just like, you're like, oh yeah, no, I want
that.
her to like tear the place up, and then they make the joke, like John
Right.
Wick's like, no, I get it, like
Yeah, I love that. I was waiting for you to get to that. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie, because he's like, please don't, and she's like, he shot my dog, bang, 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 and then they go crazy, and she's like, I'm sorry, but he shot my dog. He's like, no, I get it, I understand.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that line was delivered perfectly, and oh, I love that line. That was great.
Yeah. And so I love this action scene. It's so good. I love that. Like, I love the way she uses the dogs. Like it.
Oh
like
my
Halle
God.
Berry is just ripping people up, and I'm loving it.
Yes.
And
I'm loving it. I love how like the dogs will be doing one thing and she'll like whistle and they'll like boom, 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 boom. It's the action in this part of the movie is one of my favorite, like, hey, we're gonna knock down some goons action scenes, because I mean it all feels real at all, and the dogs, the way they attack, the dogs kick some real ass in this movie.
oh yeah, but they never do anything that isn't like believable, right? Like
Right.
for the most part, the dogs are not killing dudes. The dogs are
Right.
disabling dudes, or like taking, like they take, I think they take a
Distracting
weapon at
or-
some point, or yeah.
Yeah.
So they do. It's very, very good. Here is my complaint about Halle Berry's character and this action scene. I think that they put her on this like level of being a John Wick level badass, which is
Right.
awesome, right? Like
Yes.
I wanted more of that. I basically said that at the beginning, right? Is I really wanted John Wick to be fighting other John Wick
John Wick
wannabes.
esque. Yeah.
And just like honestly, for them, like having two John Wicks blasting their way through a bunch of goons is great, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that I don't like is that, and I don't know if this is going to sound horrible or not, but I feel like John Wick gets his kicked in this fight. Even like he gets his shit kicked in through the whole movie, including
Right.
this fight, and like she like gets touched like once, and it's like not even like leave a mark, kind of like get hit.
Like
Yeah,
realistic.
she just murders dudes completely, like, and so like maybe she's better than John Wick or whatever, but like I don't know, it felt like it wasn't exactly equal opportunity brutality to me. You know, like one of the things that makes John Wick cool is that like John Wick deals out some punishment, but John Wick takes some punishment, and to
Yeah.
sometimes inhuman levels. But it
Yeah.
definitely felt like she could do no, like she was almost like Jesus in this, like she was
Right.
untouchable.
Could do no wrong. Didn't get shot. Didn't get stabbed. Just kind of like pushed her way through it like she was the big boss,
Yeah,
and nobody could touch her. Yeah,
yeah,
I feel you. I did not think about that at the time. Retrospectively, like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I understand where you're coming from. I don't remember her getting in a lot of pain. Um, I know that Halle Berry was really excited to be in this movie,
yeah,
and maybe they just wanted to be like, "Hey, we've got this awesome thing for you, and we're not going to draw it out too much," which is why she's not in any of the movie after he gets to the desert.
yeah.
Um,
And I'm okay with it. But like I really want her to have her own movie now. And if she
yes,
has her own movie, I really hope that they don't continue that trend. Like I hope they like make
right,
her a true John Wick-esque character in her
John
own right.
Wickian character.
Yeah. So then after that, we have the desert scene, which I kind of thought was dumb. Like I thought that whole thing was dumb.
Well, during the desert scene, there's some real world and character building going on in the sense of Winston, in the sense of not Morpheus. What is his real name?
Oh, you're talking about the King of the Bowery.
Yeah,
So
the
like the
King of the Bowery.
adjudicator going around
Yes,
and like
like there's
jacking
a lot of
people
this.
up.
Yeah, going around being like, "Hey, you got 1 week. You gave John Wick 7 bullets. You get 7 days." There's some real world building there where they're leading into something, so that it doesn't feel like kind of like this deconsecrated thing comes out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like they're like, "You guys helped out somebody that killed a high table, and you can't do that."
Yeah. So let's take an aside real quick to talk about the whole adjudicator subplot, because that it's a fairly minimal thing until the very end of the movie.
Right.
I think the adjudicator actress did a pretty good job, but I'm also like, it felt like that character was like almost a non-character.
In the sense of like
She had
growth.
very few lines, but she was supposed to be, so like they kind of like give her enough screen time that she's supposed to be a main character,
Right.
right? But
But
like
she kind of comes across as this ominous overpower thing, right? Like that's kind of how I took it, is as she comes into the scenes, she comes across as this like this judge that can't be touched. You can't mess with her, and she knows you can't mess with her, and so she goes around with this aura of power around her. So she's very deliberate with the words that she uses.
So I recognize that that's what they were trying to do, is like set her up as this, like she's actually the face of an unseen force.
Yes.
But I guess I felt like they didn't set that up very well. Like I never like she was trying to project that, and I understood
Right.
that, but I never felt that, right? Like they don't ever like give you this thing, because like for the most part, everyone she goes and like talks to, not a single one of them are scared of her, and as a matter of fact, every single one of them defy her.
Yeah.
Like they never give credence to this ominous power she's supposed to exude, and she never does anything that like makes it seem like she has anything to back shit up.
That is my one issue, right? So I enjoyed that I enjoyed that character for what she was supposed to be, so I kind of bought into that. Um, but I wanted to see her flex a little bit. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I wanted
But
to see.
like,
I wanted to feel her being powerful.
right, like she goes out and gets Yakamoto or whatever that guy's name is. Goes out and gets the ninjas, and they're basically her muscle through the rest of that movie after she gets them. But like in my mind, I'm like, hey, I want to see you be something to that level.
Yeah, I really honestly, I expected her to just like at every time she was on screen, I was waiting for her to just like kill 5 dudes with a pencil.
Right?
I was
Yeah.
waiting for that. And I never got it. And I don't know. I guess that felt like, and especially then that she goes and gets some like cronies, further like creates this illusion that like actually she is not anything to be worried about. And I guess it also was driven home by all of those characters laughing at her, or like
Yeah.
complete, like I don't know.
Like everybody dismissed her. Like that's you're right. When I was watching the movie, I was very intent on being like, oh, she's supposed to be this, the face of the faceless men, right? Like she's supposed to be like the hand that causes judgment for the people that everyone's afraid of. And I stuck to that through the movie. If I were to watch it a second time, especially after this conversation, I would definitely remember definitely, and I would definitely recognize like she gets defied almost everywhere she goes, and the only reason that she is able to back up what she's doing is because she has gotten these cronies, not because of something she is doing, and that creates a character issue
Yeah, and
for me.
and jumping ahead just a little bit, let's not get stuck on a tangent here because we will get here for a full discussion. But I
Right.
like one of the things that I expected to do, like by the end of the movie, I was just like, why? I feel like this character basically could have not existed. Like, could honestly like letters, like they could have sent letters by pigeon, and it would have
Yeah.
replaced that character. Um, and I think that's a bad sign. The thing that I expected her to do
I think that's a better movie.
to like,
I think you just made a better movie there.
right,
Like in the sense of
that would give
like
mystique and
you,
stuff
you
to
like the
it.
black hand type thing, you
Yeah.
get this letter that just appears, you don't see the messenger, and you just like, oh, okay, this is what that's a better movie.
Right. That's kind of my thing, right? But that's the other thing. The thing that I expected them to do to redeem her as this badass character is at the end when they like charge in with like the most elite of the elite. I expected her to be leading them, like fighting with them.
Right.
And she
Not
just
going
never
up
does
to
that. Like
six.
she's just like fucking. She like sits in her room the whole time. Like I guess they were trying to make her be this aloof thing, but I don't know. It just didn't work for me.
Right.
And like you said, I had issues with the character. But going back to like that subplot,
The desert.
before we go to the desert, the one other thing I want to touch on is, like you said, she gets the ninjas to be her cronies.
Yeah.
I actually really like the ninjas, and
Yes.
the head honcho of the ninjas, whose name I can't remember, but he's the bald guy.
Yeah.
He is great. Like he's an awesome character. It's just
I love
so
everything
believable
about that character.
He's like clearly psychotic, and like the scene where he's fighting John Wick after John Wick gets off like in Grand Central or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they like end up at the Continental. And then when
and he's
like,
got his hand on. Yeah.
and then then he's like so upset about it, and so then they like he follows him into the Continental, and he like goes to sit in the waiting room on the manager, and the way they shot that, where they do the wide angle to show you all the furniture in the room, and he goes and sits right next to him, and it's just when he did that, everyone in the theater cracked up. I cracked up. I thought it was hilarious.
I thought it was great. Oh my goodness, that's proper placement of comedy.
Oh yeah, it was the proper placement of comedy. And the cinematography there really was like really what made the joke. Like the director killed it on that scene.
Yes.
I love when he like gets up and moves, and then the dude like scoots over excited and like fangirls out over him.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a big fan, and he's like the actor is just like selling it so hard. He's doing such a good job.
Oh, he does such a great job.
Um,
He really does.
and we'll come back to him at the end, but I do think that like a lot of the humor that is in here was very well done.
I agree.
And very well placed. The other thing about the ninjas that I did want to touch on is that this goes back to like the little detail stuff. Every time a ninja appears out of nowhere in a scene, they are they are on screen that entire scene.
Yeah. Whoa.
And
yeah.
you like
and
don't
if
see
they go
them.
back into the darkness, if you like when that one ninja comes down and he's like cuts that like I don't know, they're in a locker room or something.
Yeah, when they're assaulting the Bowery.
Yeah, they're assaulting the Bowery and he comes down and like cuts that dude's neck and like goes back up or yeah, he does that and he goes back up. I looked up there and he's still up there and it's like blacked out and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, he's so hard to
gosh.
see, but if you look, you can see him. And like actually at the end of that scene, he even jumps down off the locker to walk away with the rest of the crew, which is just, it's just like, but like even at the end when like John Wick's fighting his way through the ninjas in the very last fight scene, like at that point I had started looking for them actively and I was able to spot all of them only just though, but like that's one of those things that like man that sells it so hard, that does such a good job.
That was beautiful directing. That was beautifully done. Like how they managed to make it all blend in and not make it look too childish or cartoonish because it was real. I loved that.
Yeah.
It was ninjas were one of my top 3 favorite parts of that whole movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So okay, so back to the desert. I think the desert's dumb. I think that whole thing with him and the dude that sits above the high table is dumb, especially because it is made completely inconsequential. Because after he like does that and like gets the mission from the dude to like redeem himself,
right?
When he goes back to town, like everyone's still after him. So the dude's like not even giving him like a bubble. Like he gets no protection, no really any resources or anything because he still doesn't like give him a weapon or anything.
He gets nothing.
And then he ends up defying him at the end anyway. So it was just completely meaningless.
I think it was to build the world so that you got to see the face of the man that sits above the table. And so seeing that guy, knowing he's out there, knowing that like if John Wick were to betray him, it's over. There's nothing he can do. And he's the only one that can give him back his life, the life of peace, the life of John Wick that he wanted. And realizing when John Wick is there, like that's not what his intent is. He's like, if you do this, you either die now or you join us forever. Like,
okay.
It to me, it was not inconsequential in the sense of building the world, but inconsequential to the sense of having in the movie. Yeah.
I'm gonna knock your little theory over here. Okay. So one, the dude never offers him the life of peace. Like he is very explicit. Like you're gonna be killing for us forever. And number 2, here's the problem. All of those stakes that you set, there's no one above him. Once he does this, there's no going back. No one can save him or redeem him. He'll be an enemy forever. They already did that with the high table, and then all of a sudden there's this dude above the high table. So now there's the dude who's above the guy who's above the high table. Right?
All right.
Like they set the world up the first time such that there were the stakes of the high table. Like there's nothing above the table.
Right.
And then all of a sudden in this movie, there's a dude above the table. Like he's been completely unmentioned. He comes up out of the blue. And so now there's going to be the dude who sits beside the table. And like he's gonna be the real one pulling the string. You know what I mean? Like it's
right. It can go down a slippery slope for sure.
So I think it was completely inconsequential, both in terms of plot and being in the movie. And honestly, kind of bummed me out. Or like I wouldn't have minded it so much if there was some meaning to it besides like John Wick losing a finger, which the John Wick losing a finger was also completely inconsequential because dude just still rips people up like one finger let down or not.
Yeah, that the part of John Wick losing the finger for the rest of the movie, I was like, oh my gosh, how's that gonna play in? That's gonna play in somehow. They wouldn't do that just to oh yeah, they just did that to say John Wick lost a finger because John Wick is still John Wick with one less finger.
Exactly. Yeah. Nothing of consequence happens in the desert. And I thought that was a real failing of this movie, though not the greatest failing of this movie.
Not the greatest.
Oh,
I think
we're getting
I
there.
think the desert was good for pacing. Other than that, I agree with you in the sense of like the desert has no consequences because I I saw it as a world building thing and I expected the loss of the finger to come back at some point, but it didn't. So at the end of the movie, I was like, what was he doing? Like, what was the whole point of that at the end of the day, other than maybe being like, oh yeah, I'll join you so I can walk out of here with my life. But like, other than that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but then like he went right back to the thing he'd be doing if he hadn't walked in there in the first
Right.
place. So, that's kind of my thing. Um, okay, so here we move on to start talking about the like final act of the
The
movie.
final act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He goes back to the Continental, back to where it all began, and is like presumably there to kill his buddy Winston because that's what the man above the high table is being told to tell him by the
Required.
dude beside the high table. Um, uh, and I'm sorry.
Every time I
Um,
watch these movies now, I'm like, who's the guy beside the high table?
um, and so then he gets in there, and honestly, this movie would have been better if he had just killed Winston in that scene and it like hard cut.
What?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Okay, so I love this fight scene in the Continental. Like the shootout
Yes.
in the Continental is great. It's the first time where like guns are going off, like hardcore
Yes.
John Wick style action.
And John Wick's trying to like murk folks and he can't, so he has to go get a bigger weapon. You mentioned that earlier, and I meant to be like, yes, like I loved how he's like, hey, they got new armor, like, and it doesn't change, right? Like he's always like, oh, I have to like get him right under the neck in the faceplate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So okay, so like the whole thing is great. The setup is great. All that stuff is great. And real quick, the concierge, that guy, that actor, that
Freaking
guy
amazing.
deserves a freaking Grammy or whatever. Like he just
Oscar.
showers of
Yes.
accolades. Whatever, man. Like I don't watch that crap. The dude deserves accolades because he took what is actually a very minor role, very few speaking parts, and like
Yes.
across all
Through
three
the whole
movies,
series.
turned it into a character in its own right. Like I care about
Yes.
that character, and like again, like it goes back to the details, right? There's like the thing where they get the shotguns, right, and like you can tell that the concierge is like trained, but he's not used to it. Like there's a scene where he's like reloading and they're like hiding in some like a I don't know like a warehousey supply area, and
Right.
he like goes to push his glasses up, and like when he does it, his hand is shaking,
Yeah.
and it's like
Yep.
it's just a little detail. It's like it sets, you
the
know,
the little things that set him apart. I was like, hey, I've been concierge for so long, like
but like
I'm not used to doing all of this.
right, not used
I
to getting shot
I've
at.
been trained to, but like
And like
Yeah.
that scene has no purpose other than to show you him pushing his glasses up with his hand shaking. Like it's to show you the shaking hand, which I think is
Yeah.
great. It's a little detail, it really sells it, which I think is super dope. But like this whole fight scene's great. It culminates in the fight with the ninjas. I assume you
with
loved
two
that.
head ninjas.
It culminates in the fight with all the ninjas, right? He has to like
Oh yeah,
fight
yeah.
his way up the tower of ninjas to fight the head ninja.
That was like a video game.
Like
I
Mortal
wanted
Kombat.
to play that game.
Yeah, yeah, exactly like Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat used to have the tower.
Yeah,
exactly
for
like
sure.
that. And all of the ninjas, despite being like characters that we only meet in the inside of this fight scene, actually had some like character to them, which I really enjoyed. Especially the two like the twins.
Oh my goodness. I, I don't know if they were twins, but like
Or they're like
second.
brothers. They look similar.
they look similar. They're
And
like,
they like
brothers.
fight together
Um,
intentionally.
Yeah, and they were awesome. Like when they were like, "All right, is this John Wick? Is this? He's like, all right, I know. And they like help him up, and then he's like, all right, let's fight. And the whole fight scene, I'm like, oh, this is intense. And I love at the end of that when he's like, all right, I'll see you again, or whatever he says, in a different language, and then they look like they're about to get up, and then they just lay down.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, all right, we've lost this fight. Let's stop.
Yeah, well, because he says that in their language to like basically point out that like yes, I knew all the you were talking about me. You know what I mean? It's very
Yeah.
well done.
Yeah.
He like
Oh, it's
essentially
so
he beats both of them up with a belt.
Yeah. Which is a callback to when he goes into the theater and he like unloads all the stuff, and they're like, the belt too, and he's like, really? And he takes the belt off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that was a callback.
Yeah, there were lots of good little callbacks throughout the whole movie. I love the like when he beats the first set of ninjas and the crazy ninja boss guy is just like that actor's face, everything was so good there.
I've seen him in other stuff and he is awesome. Like, I love him. I've not seen a movie that I've seen him in and been like, oh, he was okay. He always does the best in everything that he does.
Yeah. So I think he was great. I think their fight scene at the end is phenomenal. It's very good. And I think and like again, like he makes a joke at the end, which I thought was a very good joke. Like I loved it.
Yeah.
And then he like and like honestly that like his like thing of like, oh, I'll catch up or whatever, and stuff was like actually like a perfect way for that character to go. Right?
Like he was like, I'm gonna get you. Just I need a second. And John Wick's like, no, you won't, and he just like walks away or whatever. I really liked the way that they ended that, and it was a really awesome scene when he like kept disappearing on John Wick, and then all of a sudden, like John Wick does it to him, and I'm like, oh man, that's why he's John Wick. And I know he did it earlier in the train station, but like, oh man, I really, really loved that part of that fight between them when John Wick disappears on him and comes out of the darkness behind him. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted.
Oh yeah, no, that was all handled very well. So here is my problem. First problem, the adjudicator again is basically made meaningless throughout this whole thing. And like it clearly shows her like escalating from like, oh, we're clearly going to win to on second thought. And then after they lose, it's like, oh well, maybe we should parlay now, which was also like weird because it was like, well, we literally just killed everyone. Like, why don't we just kill you too?
We didn't mention when they deconsecrated the Continental. Everybody rushing out. That was a pretty cool how they were like deconsecrated, and it was a big deal to everyone. I really liked the world building, and that was part of it. That they were like, oh, we can cut anything. It kind of gave the feeling of like the High Table or those people can cut anything off at any point that they want, and it just you're screwed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, she goes in for the parlay, and is like, hey, we can consecrate you if you know. Whatever.
So here is where my problems really start. So as soon as they said they were going to parlay, I knew Winston was going to betray the fuck out of John.
Yeah?
I saw that coming really early. I actually started to think that maybe Winston was going to betray John when John didn't kill Winston. And then when they called the parlay, I was like, oh yeah, he's going to betray him. And so then he shoots him over the wall, and when he first does that, I'm thinking, oh, maybe they set this up, and John's gonna like fall onto like a mattress, and they're actually in cahoots, and it's just
that's what I thought when he shot him.
But then
when he went over the wall, I was like, they must be in cahoots.
And then they show this absurd, brutal falling to death scene of John Wick. Like, dude falls off the building and hits like 6 other buildings on the way down. And then smacks the pavement off the roof of the Continental, which is like a 10-story building in its own right.
I would say that's like at least 9 stories tall.
Yeah, and then I'm like, okay, here is my hope now for this movie, that John Wick is dead and this is the end of the movies. And I think that
Right.
would be okay. Like, I'd be totally cool with that. Like, I think, like, I'm a little annoyed, but I'd be happy with that.
Right. And then maybe go on with, somewhere else if they really wanted to continue the
Like, if
franchise.
they really wanted to
Halle
carry on
Berry.
the branding, like, give me Halle Berry's movie, right?
Yeah. I'd go see that movie day one.
Yep. And I still will go see Halle Berry's movie. I don't know if I'll go see John Wick Chapter 4 because
Because of the way they
spoiler
ended it.
alert again, John Wick doesn't die. Just like this by far, of all the things that they do to John Wick, this by far is the like this to me is this is the breaking point. Like, I can't disbelieve this.
Right.
Like, it just like they
It's just too much. They put too much between him and the ground.
right. Like, honestly, like, if they just like cut that scene out where he's falling to the alley, right, and just like show him being shot and falling off the thing,
The edge.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, because he's not really getting shot. He's getting shot in the armor, like he's pulling up his suit, right, and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, like, if they just showed that, I would be less upset. But then they like make this super huge point to be like that, and then also like Winston's not scared at the end when they like find like Winston's like the one guy who should know, and like honestly it was like, oh yeah, I can pit John Wick against the high table and win, right? Like like well, if you can do that, guess what's going to happen now,
Yeah.
And so like I think it ruins it, honestly. Like, I think that
it. Here's the thing. I don't want them to run this franchise into the dirt, right? I've enjoyed every movie, and I understand your concern, right? Because I thought, like, after 3 movies, they clearly, if this is one's good, and at that point of the movie, I was like, man, he killed him, or they're in. Well, I immediately thought they were in cahoots, and he's like, they're in cahoots, and John Wick's gonna move out of New York and move to like Montana and live the rest of his days out as a quiet man doing nothing, and no one will find him, because he's John Wick, and they'll just leave him alone. And that would have been a great way for me to see them in that movie. So the fact that he went through all that is, again, I'm much better at suspension of disbelief. But like the fact that he's like, and now we go to war with not the adjudicator, with the dowry, the Bowery.
What is it? Well, like the king of the Bowery is now recruited John Wick to go.
Lawrence
to
Fishburne
go to war.
is his name. Yeah,
to go to war with the people he was already at war with.
I was about to say, yeah,
like, so whatever.
He's like, yeah, like they're just already at war, so we're just extending this war. You know what I mean? So now I'm like, all right, this might not go as well as I was hoping for the franchise. You know what I mean?
So here's the other reason I'm worried, is because this movie is so good. It is a celebration of John Wick, the series, in that like they make all of those jokes. They do perfectly placed humor, and a lot of the jokes are self-referential. They're references to the earlier John Wick movies and stuff like that.
Right.
Things that like, you really have to see them to see this movie, and you can't do those jokes again.
Right.
Right? Like, what are they going to do in John Wick Chapter 4? The answer is they're either going to have no humor, which just means that it's going to be less fun than this one, which means it's going to automatically be worse. Or they're going to do the same fucking jokes again, because it's not like there's any, you know what I mean? Like,
and then they're really beating that dead horse.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like
nobody wants that.
They
right?
pulled out
like
all the stops. They went all the way on this one, and that's why this is where it should have ended.
I agree. I wanted it to end after this. Watching the movie, I wanted it to end after this. If they had gone to some logical conclusion where it was like, oh, like John Wick still has a bone to pick because he finds out, not that I would enjoy this, but like his wife's still alive. You know what I mean? Like that would be like, oh, he's got to go. He has to. But like this isn't a war that he really needs to be a part of. Now it's just vengeance. And I don't think
but it's not even like vengeance at this point, right? Like this movie was actually about like self-defense, right? Like John Wick was just defending himself against the high table, and now like the High Table basically believes him to be dead. The only person he could want vengeance on is Winston, which,
Right.
but like, if I was John Wick, international assassin, guess what I would do? I would just go kill Winston silently and quietly, like I know how to do, and walk
Dude,
away.
and
And like
leave it
anyone could
there.
have killed Winston, right? Like it's not like they'll
Right.
know it was John Wick because frankly the adjudicator doesn't want to admit failure, right? So like no one in the High Table will know that John Wick's alive.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. There are plot threads they could have pulled on that would have made me okay with another one. Something like maybe they found out that his wife was actually poisoned or something.
Or yeah.
And
Like if they had pulled that out, and been like, "Hey, it was all a big ploy to get you back in the game."
yeah,
Then I'd be like, "Okay, but that's not what they did. They didn't go that route." And I don't really like the route of like just war for the case of war. You know what I mean? Because then it kind of feels like, okay, we're leading into this fourth movie, what it would be, and it would be a just like as gruesome and action packed as this one was, it would drip loosely of like no story, no character development. I feel like John Wick's story arc had its three parts, had all its moments that it needed to have to close, and I feel like the story should have ended with
and
him.
honestly, a fitting end would have been him dying.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Personally, I would have liked to see him, go the way of, the Jessies from Breaking Bad, where they just wander off and live the rest of their lives in peace and solitude somewhere. You know what I mean? Like away from even people that could get you pulled back in. You know what I mean?
Well, but
like I would.
I think the theme of this, what I wished was a trilogy, and it's still a theme, regardless,
Right.
is that there are no happy endings.
True.
Right? Like that's a recurring theme in these movies, and so that's why I think like John Wick deserves to die. He has killed an absurd amount of people.
Right, absurd amount of assassins that have had working gigs. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and like presumably before the movie started, he killed an absurd amount of people who didn't deserve it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like he deserves to die, and it would have summed everything up nicely, right?
Yeah.
Like it would have been great. It would have been, there are no happy endings. It like the movies are, the series is mildly nihilistic in that way, and so
Yeah.
I felt like it would have fit, and this is just like you can't top this movie, right? Like there are no jokes left to make. There are no stops left to pull.
Yeah, there's no threads left to pull even. Like you can't that's my issue with the ending of this. And again, I love this movie. I think this movie is amazing. I still feel like it's a must see in the theaters. Like you have to take the time to go see this movie if you haven't seen this movie. But the ending did leave me kind of feeling like, well, why are we going there? You know what I mean? Why are we doing this instead of something else? You know what I mean?
Yep.
But that being said, I liked the ending up until even the banging and the falling and the living. I liked it all the way up until he goes into the Bowery and the king, and he's like, hey, I need guns or help or whatever. And he's like, yeah, it's time for war. You know what I mean? That was the only moment in the movie where I was like, oh, we should have just let it be at that point, him and his dog walking down the alley, and then boom, they walk off into the sunset or whatever. And even then, even if it doesn't go with the themes that you said the trilogy had been running, even then you still get a wrap of the story and like, hey, we're done here. You know what I mean? You could end it there. If they never, now they're going to make another one because it made good money, but if it never made another one with the ending they gave us here, it feels incomplete. You know what I mean?
Right.
It feels like there's something that we're missing every time you watch this trilogy. But if they ended him walking away and that's it, they could have ended it there. They could have taken different routes. They could even still do this ridiculous war thing, but like at the beginning of the next movie have him walk into that. But doing that does leaves it open ended, and I don't like open ending. I don't like it ending open ended like that. That was honestly one of my issues with the second movie was it ended open ended. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, what it like? I don't like. I'm always worried about the risk of them not going forward with that story and ending a story where I'm just like, well, what happens? How does that end? You know what I mean? And I'm not a fan of not having closure.
Well, the good news is that I don't need closure because at this point I don't think I care about whatever they're going to do next.
So, going off of that, do you think you will be there to see the fourth movie when it comes out, or a spin-off?
So I think that like if they gave Halle Berry her own movie, I would watch that. Like I'm really interested in that because her character was awesome. And it felt
Yes.
like there was a lot of unexplored territory there. And
Yeah.
I really like they could do so much with the dogs and stuff in like fight scenes. Like that'd be really interesting. But yeah, like with John Wick specifically, Chapter 4
Yeah.
comes out. I really don't think I'm interested.
I
It
unfortunately am in agreement with you because, and I say unfortunate because I love this franchise. You know what I mean? I'm a big fan of it, and I really like the action that they do. I love the attention to detail. I love the stories. I love the world they've built. But I don't want to see them. I don't want to see them go down this route of war, where and that was quotes. Like I don't want them to go down this war road and it just be the diminishing returns. You know what I mean? Not as good and ruining what I love about this franchise.
I totally agree. Um, on that somewhat disappointing note, still a pretty good movie.
Definitely a good movie. Like I said, I don't think an ending can ruin like the it can really put chains on a movie, but I don't think it would ruin the experience of watching that movie to that point. You know what I mean?
I would wholeheartedly disagree. There are definitely endings that have ruined movies for me.
We should talk about that one time
Yeah,
on another day.
yeah, definitely on another day. Um, as far as like usually we like to talk about like actors and actresses. I think every single person in this movie flipping killed it.
Yes.
And most of them are big names anyway. Who, for the most part, like Halle Berry's in a movie. That means you probably want to see that movie, etc.
Right.
Like
Keanu Reeves in the movie, so forth and so on. Yes,
yeah.
obviously.
So I don't think
I'm
as much to say
fan
there.
of them.
I'm definitely out of things to say about John Wick. Do you have anything else you want to say before we go, Stu?
No, I've said my piece.
All right. Well, this has been the dynamic review of John Wick Chapter 3. Man, what a ride! This has been our longest one so far.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm surprised we agreed as much as we did. But all right. Well, peace out. Have a good night. Y'all take care now.